Well, hello again. If you're watching this, then that means that you are continuing your notes. Good for you. I'm so proud of you. Okay, this video is going to cover the first set of figurative language notes, as you guys can see in our lovely PowerPoint slide. Looks like this. I've already taken the liberty of updating my table of contents by writing down understanding figurative language. However, I did not add my page numbers, so I'm going to go ahead and do that super quick. So if you guys remember, we started elements of lit right here. This is on page 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. And then this is going to be page 10. All right. A lot of my students have notebooks that do not look this way. For example, and my notes changed, obviously, depending on the class. My page 9 is actually full of information and so on and so forth. So just kind of depends on you. Remember, you are setting up your notebook on your own. So this is purely for demonstration purposes only. You guys should be paying attention to the notes in the PowerPoint slide, not my notebook. I'm taking the notes just to make sure that you guys have a visual reference. Okay. I'm going to title this Understanding Figurative Language. And this is going to be the first set, so I'm going to say number 1. Okay. Now with this, we're going to cover, I think it's 11 different words, if I remember correctly. So I will put up that slide in a bit so you guys can see. Just to give you a quick recap on what we are actually doing. Today we are going to cover different writing techniques or figurative language techniques that make writing enriched or better. Okay, why do you need to learn this stuff in the first place? Well, let's start off from the thing that we talked about in class. If you guys remember, I have sorted through a bajillion different terms in the English world, and I've narrowed it down to like the top 300 in case you guys actually want to see what the list looks like. These are basically the top 300 words that, you know, most students should be kind of familiar with. Are you actually going to memorize all 300 of them? Absolutely not. Maybe if you're an English major, maybe, but even for me, I only know probably about 95% of them. So it's not perfect, and you don't have to be perfect. You can just be you, all right? So what is the practical value of learning these words? Just to kind of tell you really quickly. So I'm not expecting you guys to be 30 years old and to completely memorize what a simile and metaphor are. You know, that's just kind of unrealistic. But I do want you to have the ability of being curious. I want you to be able to look at a piece of writing or speech or whatever and be like, oh, I think they're doing a thing there. If you can have that feeling right there where you can recognize that somebody is doing something unique or a pattern or whatever, then good, you've learned this lesson. Thinking critically about language is really important to the real world, and it can help you understand literature or just writing in general in a new way. Now, being aware of these techniques will also mean that you can partially use them if you practice, so that's just kind of how it is. This will enhance your overall ability to understand the English language and the writing world. This right here is going to be a little screenshot of everything that we're going to cover today. So this is, again, set number 1. Okay. If you guys are watching this and you need to have a reference for the words, or you're not sure if you're on the right section, you know, there you go. Okay. All right. The first word we are going to do is alliteration. And keep in mind, this video is going to go by fairly quickly because I'm trying to get these done super quick. I will occasionally pull up some examples if I can, but some of the examples were things that I could only show in class, so just keep it in mind. For my definition here, I'm going to just do one of these. I'm just going to do a line break, and I'm going to put my definitions on a new line. Again, you don't have to write it this way. This is just how I'm doing it, okay? So alliteration. The definition that I have is a writing technique where you use words with similar sounds near each other, preferably at the beginning of the word. This is a really cheesy definition from me. Again, I am not an expert on assonance and consonance and phonics and grammar, things like that. Those are just my weaknesses as an English teacher, so your results may vary. If you guys grew up with phonics and you knew what phonics is, you know what phonics are, then you're going to have an easier time on this, okay? So the real dictionary definition is right down there. It's a repetition of the beginning or initial consonant sound. We'll talk about consonants later, okay? For this one, I'm just going to say a writing technique or writing tech where you repeat the beginning sound of words. Again, that is my own cheesy definition. That is not, that's kind of like, kind of oversimplifying it, but I think it works for most people. It's a writing technique where you repeat the beginning sound of words. All right. If you are a teacher watching this, you're probably cringing right now, and that's totally fine. If you were a high school student, you're probably like, all right, that makes sense. Some examples. So like some tongue twisters do this all the time. Like you have, she sells seashells by the seashore. All right. There's also alliteration in like the real world, like Bed Bath & Beyond or Krispy Kreme, things like that. So alliteration, it is a writing technique where you repeat the beginning of sounds of words. Cool. Wonderful. Got it. All right. Now in class, I usually play a little example from the movie V for Vendetta. So I did not make this video. I just kind of snagged it off of YouTube. So here you go. Here is an example of the character V, as seen right here, who is introducing himself to the main character. When he introduces himself, he has like a little speech that he gives. So take a look.
Voila! In view, a humble vaudevillian veteran, cast vicariously as both victim and villain by the vicissitudes of fate. This visage, no mere veneer of vanity, is a vestige of the vox populi, now vacant, vanished. However, this valorous visitation of a bygone vexation stands vivified, and has vowed to vanquish these venal and virulent vermin, vanguarding vice and vouchsafing the violently vicious and voracious violation of volition. The only verdict is vengeance, a vendetta, held as a votive not in vain, for the value and veracity of such shall one day vindicate the vigilant and the virtuous. Verily, this vichyssoise of verbiage veers most verbose, so let me simply add that it's my very good honor to meet you, and you may call me V.
What a crazy person. Okay, anyway, moving on. The next word. Apostrophe. Keep in mind this is not the same thing as the word that we learned in our punctuation notes. This is going to be a dramatic term. An apostrophe. Okay, an apostrophe is a situation where a character, probably in theater most likely, but a character is going to kind of detach themselves from reality, and then they're going to communicate with something that isn't actually there. So I'm just going to say when a character, I'm going to say literally that, when a character detaches themselves from reality and talks to something not there. Again, pardon the messy notes. I'm just doing it for pure demonstration, okay? Your notebooks are probably going to look a lot better than this. Now, for an example, I have a really cheap one. It is the scene from Macbeth, which is in Act 2, I think scene 1. Yeah, it's when Macbeth is... Macbeth is a Shakespeare play. I should back up a little bit. Macbeth is a Shakespeare play about a person who needs to murder somebody else, and there's a lot of guilt involved, so on and so forth. It's one of Shakespeare's biggest plays, as far as like the most popular. And there's a scene where Macbeth is debating whether or not he should murder the king, and he drops this line, "Is this a dagger which I see before me, the handle toward my hand?" And I even have a picture from the stage production. So in this instance, you have a character who is communicating with something that isn't actually there. You could say like they're hallucinating, whatever. It all kind of works. I tried really hard in class today to think of a Disney example, and the only one that I can really think of is from the cartoon version of The Lion King, when Simba is like looking up at the sky and he sees his father, and like he kind of has a one-sided conversation with his father about like what he should do and things like that. That's kind of an apostrophe if you look at it from the angle of what if somebody else was there watching him and they just saw like Simba just totally tripping out, looking at the sky, talking to nothing. There you go. I guess that could work. But it's a Disney film, so I mean, it doesn't have to follow the rules. Okay, the next word is assonance. Keep in mind, assonance and consonance and alliteration are going to be kind of lumped together a little bit. And again, I am not an expert on this. If you understand what phonics are and you were raised on the phonics system, which is a way of raising children to learn the English language, if you know what phonics is, you probably are at an advantage compared to other people who are not, okay? So this will probably make more sense once we actually talk about consonants. For this definition, you just want to say a writing device where two or more words repeat the same vowel sound, but they have a different consonant sound. So writing tech, where words repeat the same vowel sound. Again, I'm using a simplified definition for all my fellow teachers that are watching this, like, LOL, that's not correct. I'm trying my best here. I'm not an expert. And vowels, I'm just going to make it like a little key over there. You got A, you got E, you got I, you got O, and you got U, and then obviously sometimes you have Y. I just didn't put it on the slide. A lot of my students were like, what about Y? Why do I have to put Y? Okay, the example that I have is this. There's some creeps I wouldn't meet if you made that leap with your peeps and with a heap of cash. Okay, so the E sound is what is being repeated over and over again. So that is an example of consonance. All right, it's not the most perfect example, but it does work. Which leads me to consonants. So consonants is going to be pretty similar. If that was a little quick for you, I will review both in just a second. So consonants is where you're basically going to have repeating words with the consonant sound. And if you don't know what a consonant is, it's where you are breaking your breath early in order to make a sound. So if you say like ah, you know, you don't have to necessarily interrupt your breathing to make that sound. But if I say b or k or d or f or j, you know, I have to like stop my breathing mid-breath in order to make that sharp sound, or like, you know, p or s, you know, things like that. That's called phonics, kids. If you didn't learn phonics as a kid, you might be at a disadvantage, just a little bit, okay? Writing technique. Where words repeat the same consonant. It helps if you spell the word consonant right. It's been a long day. Leave me alone. And I'm also going to write down a consonant is when you interrupt breathing to make a sound. Now, you don't actually have to write down, you know, all 21 consonants that are here, but this should give you a little bit of an idea if you sound out these letters. Okay, so remember, assonance is where you're repeating the same vowel sound with different consonants. Consonants is where you are repeating the same consonant sound. So I have sent and went, cheer and beer, far and jar. I am positive that those examples work. If you are a fellow teacher watching this and those examples don't work, it'd be really nice if you would let me know somehow. Because, again, I am willingly admitting that I'm not an expert on this. Hyperbole. If you are going to say this word wrong, of course, I said it in my brain and then I spelled it wrong. If you're going to say this incorrectly, you'll probably hear somebody say hyperbole. It's the second time I've done that today. Yeah, it's hyperbole. Okay, hyperbole is an easy one to get down. Most kids have heard this in elementary school. But when you use hyperbole, what you are doing is using an extreme exaggeration of something. So what does it mean? An extreme exaggeration. That's what happens when I said the word incorrectly in my head and then I just wrote it out incorrectly. Man. Okay, so hyperbole, it's an extreme exaggeration. So if you've ever heard of a valley girl, or if you've ever heard of a kid who's like, oh my god, I'm like literally dying because Starbucks is out of pumpkin spice. Okay, wow, really? Like you're actually dying right now? You are actually drawing your last breath because Starbucks is out of your precious pumpkin spice? Okay, I'm sure you're actually dying right now. You know, if you ever hear anybody do that, that would be hyperbole, okay? They are greatly exaggerating whatever's happening. The only time you should be saying, like, I'm literally dying right now is if you're literally dying. Just saying. Next, a metaphor. Again, most kids have learned this in elementary school, but it doesn't hurt to review. So a metaphor is a writing technique. Where the writer or the author, whatever you want to say, is saying one thing is something else. Ugh, sorry, I'm messing up on my writing here. Okay. So it's a writing technique where the author is calling or saying something is something else. Like if I'm going to say, wow, you're strong like a lion. Okay, that's not a metaphor. That's a simile. But if I'm like, you are a lion. Okay, I'm literally calling you a lion. That's a metaphor. All right. If I'm like, hey, you're like a panther. You know, that's a simile. But if I'm like, you are a panther. You know, I guess you're literally a panther. Maybe I'm using hyperbole. But that would be a metaphor if you are something else. Okay. Now, I love to gush about this book series, Red Rising. This is my brand new fancy collector's edition that I just got in. Took me like a year to get this. Anyway, in that book series, there is a really, really good metaphor where the main character is watching his wife give like a speech because bad things are happening at the moment, and the main character is just like totally in love with this girl, and he just says, in the face of cold power, she is fire. And it's like, woo, that's such a good line, right? There's my example. In the face of cold power, she is fire. Which, speaking of the current times that we live in, there are a lot of kids that are like, wow, that's lit. Wow, that's fire. This song is fire. Like, kids are saying that all the time now, and that technically is metaphor. So there you go. Now, if they're like, wow, that song is like fire, I mean, they're either talking like a valley girl or they're trying to use a simile. So there you go. Next, onomatopoeia. I keep spelling things wrong today. I am so sorry. This is embarrassing. And I could totally take the time to re-record all this, but ain't nobody got time for that. Onomatopoeia. Okay, what is onomatopoeia? It's where you use words to represent natural sounds. So, like, the best example I could give is like the classic Batman series, which, like, when they punch people, it'd be like bam, pow, blap, things like that. It's a really, really old school example, but it works. So, writing technique, where you use words to, you could say, to imitate sounds, to represent sounds, something like that. Or you imitate sounds. Now, Eminem does this a lot in his music, and today in class I played like just a teeny tiny bit of a song that just came out. I will not be able to put that here because it will probably flag the copyright protection. So I actually cannot play you an example, but Eminem is a musician who does onomatopoeia a lot. Particularly, like, he's a rap artist, so obviously his songs involve guns sometimes. And whenever he's imitating the sound of a gun, he'll say like blam or something like that. And that's just how it is. Okay. Now I'm going to continue on to the next page because I want to have room for everything. So I'm going to call this Understanding Figurative Language, Fig Lang 1. Again, you don't have to do it that way. It's just how I'm doing it. Okay. The next word is personification. Another classic word that most kids know. Personification is when you are giving human qualities to non-human things. So a writing technique where you could say you apply human qualities, you give human qualities. It's all the same thing. Where you give human qualities to non-human things. So you could think about WALL-E from the movie WALL-E. WALL-E is a robot. He is not a person, but WALL-E does things that are very human-like. Like there's the whole scene where he's dancing to Eve, or where he like obviously wants to hold hands, doing things like that. He is showing human emotions, but he is not a human. Thus, he is personified. You could also think about Toy Story. Every single character in Toy Story, because they're toys, they are also demonstrating personification because, like, those are all inanimate objects, but they're still alive. See what I mean? We talked about this word in class today and about how useless this word will be once we discover artificial intelligence or aliens, because if those things are capable of showing emotion, then this word just kind of gets thrown out the window. It should really be like where you give sentient qualities to non-sentient things, if you understand what sentience is. Now, for an example, I have, the sky is crying. If the sky is crying, not only are you using connotation, but you're also using personification, and what you're doing is creating a symbol. So you're actually doing 3 different techniques all in one shot. The sky is crying. And most people should be able to figure out what that means, but if the sky is crying, it must be raining, right? Another example would be like, oh, the wind is howling. If the wind is howling, it's making like kind of a screeching noise or a loud yelp or something like that. So, but it's wind, it can't actually make that noise. It's just sounds like it's doing it, right? So there you go. It must be really windy. If you guys are fans of The Nightmare Before Christmas, if you pay attention to the lyrics of This Is Halloween, there's this line right here where they say, this is Halloween, pumpkins scream in the dead of night. Okay, well, that is personification, because pumpkins cannot literally scream. And if they could scream, then that would be terrifying because we carve them every single year. Wouldn't that just be absolutely disturbing? Oh yeah, pet rocks. I forgot to talk about this. Okay, so in case you're a youngin' who never learned this, back in the day there used to be this thing called a pet rock. It was the best pet ever because like pet rocks are literally just so chill. All they do is just stay in one spot all day, and you don't even have to feed them or water them. You just kind of give them a little bit of head pats and some attention, and that's all they require. Head pats are very welcome with pet rocks, and pet rocks are super, super chill. So yeah, you were personifying a rock. If anyone's ever like, oh yeah, man, it's my favorite plant. He's really chill. Doesn't really do much. Yeah, well, you're personifying your plant. You're personifying your rock. So there you go. I'm pretty sure that person who invented the pet rock made a lot of money, but could be wrong. I think it was like an 80s thing. Who knows? Okay, the next word, rhyme. Rhyme is going to be like really simplified here because technically rhyme can be really, really complicated in the English world. There are many different people that disagree on the different categories of rhyme and the definition and all that. I'm going to simplify it. Rhyme is a writing technique where you use words with similar sounds to create rhythm. It's where you're using sounds with similar using words with similar sounds to create rhythm. Okay, the cat and the hat, the egg and beg, ink and pink, boo and true, and soap and dope, things like that. Really simple examples. Remember, there are different categories of rhyme if you guys are actually willing to get into the technicals of it. There's poor, sufficient, rich, and very rich. Everything that I've seen online says that people are like, they love to disagree about the boundaries of where one is the other. So yeah, save it for the nerdy English people, right? Okay, next, a simile. A simile is very similar to a metaphor, except that it has one difference. Okay, a simile is a writing tech where you compare, I'm going to say 2/more things using like or as. I'm going to put like and as in quotes. Like or as. Okay. With a metaphor, if I'm like, you are a panther, right? What I'm saying is like, you are crafty, strong, sneaky, whatever, right? You are a panther, right? But if I'm like, oh, you're like a panther, okay, maybe you only demonstrate like one quality of a panther and you're not completely there, right? So then you use a simile to demonstrate that concept, okay? If somebody ever is like, you're like an ox, okay, hopefully they say you're like an ox with all that strength, because if they don't actually clarify with the strength part, then I guess you could just be like, I'm a big smelly animal. Awesome, thank you. If somebody is like, you are an ox, okay, then I guess that means you literally are one. I don't know how, but they're using metaphor. But if they say like or as, they are using a simile. All right, now I have an example for you from this amazing book that everyone should read called The Handmaid's Tale. Fun fact, I also have the graphic novel edition, okay? I have several copies in here. Handmaid's Tale is a fantastic book, fantastic show, but the book is better. All right, it's beside the point. In The Handmaid's Tale, there is a lovely simile that is here. It's a really small one because the word as is right there in the middle of it, but this is what the main character says. Time has not stood still. It has washed over me, washed me away, as if I'm nothing more than a woman of sand, left by a careless child too near the water. Okay, that's a fantastic simile, because it just demonstrates a very particular concept to you. Like, this character feels left behind. They feel discarded, but man, with the visual that they leave there, it lingers. It's really good. All right. This is going to be our last word. It is called an understatement. So if a hyperbole is where you are exaggerating something, an understatement is going to be the opposite. An understatement is where you are downplaying something. You're making it seem not as serious as it is. Okay. Writing technique, even though you can do this in speech as well. It's a technique where someone downplays. I think that's the easiest way to remember it. Downplays something. If you want to write down it's the opposite of hyperbole, sure, go for it. I mean, they're your notes. You can do whatever you want. Not to get political, but I think that using politics is kind of the easiest way to demonstrate this concept. If you ever encounter a politician who is not very well experienced on a topic, it is possible that they will downplay the issue, or they will make an understatement about it. They will make it seem not as important as it needs to be. Which, like, that makes a lot of sense. You know, if somebody doesn't know about something, how can you expect them to be experienced or knowledgeable on a certain topic? So that's just kind of how it is. Back when I was a teenager, going back in time to a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, when I was a teenager, there was a lot of discussion about global climate change. And because there were a lot of adults at the time who did not understand the repercussions of climate change, so they would say, well, you know, I don't really see it, so it's not that big of a deal. Okay, well, it's an understatement. There were a lot of scientific communities at the time that were claiming it to be a massive, measurable impact on the planet, and there were some people who just did not want to go along with that, so they made an understatement about it, right? You know, it would be like another realistic example that was very relatable to teenagers would be like if somebody makes a joke about somebody else, potentially a bullying situation, and a person who is the butt of that joke obviously feels very upset by it. And then when they express how upset they are, the person who originally made the joke is like, oh, well, I wasn't being serious. Oh, I was just kidding. Oh, it's not that big of a deal. Oh, I didn't really mean that. That's an understatement. Like if you're basically dismissing that person's feelings and you're just telling them, oh, well, you're not actually as hurt as you really think you are. No, if the person's feelings are hurt, they are hurt. And so you were making an understatement about it. Possibly because you don't understand the perspective. There you go. Yeah, that's it. Okay, this is Figurative Language Set number 1. So this first set of notes, this first set of figurative language terms are going to be directly used on Florida Virtual, which is going to be like the online thing that we're using. So hopefully these notes were helpful to you. And if you're not one of my students or you're a fellow teacher, thanks for watching. Yay. Sorry for the horrible editing. Okay, bye.